Okay, I picked this up recently and I haven't had time to take it out of the shipping box until today. So let's see what surprises this has in store for us. I know it had some problem with some keys and it was a black screen, and anyways, it wasn't working. So here we are. Let's take a look at what we've got. At least it came with a nice cover. I mean, the cover has issues, but nonetheless, it's still usable and it still does its job of protecting the keyboard and stuff. So, got a few stems that we're going to have to take care of pulling out. All three of these have the stems broken inside of them. So we'll have to drill those and pop those out. And then we'll have to replace the stems in here and clean the keyboard. Now, when I was picking it up and took it out of the box, yeah, that doesn't sound healthy. So, yeah. So let's see what we've got here. Okay. Well, a few things right off the bat. Someone obviously has been in here to try to work on it. So this tab's okay. This tab's broken. This tab's broken. So we'll have to deal with that. This has barely enough for the screw to come in to it. It's really dirty as well. So, all right, we have our work cut out for us as far as the keyboard goes. You should get some should get the vacuum in here. But for now, so the board was taken out. Obviously, like I said, this was work done. Here's what was rattling inside the tab that broke off the top part of the case. Let's get some of this. All right. Let's see if there's anything outstanding here or anything that stands out. Doesn't seem to be. Okay, make sure you got the right ROMs in here. Might as well take this off. Yeah. We're missing some of the standoffs here. So we'll have to deal with that as well. So that shouldn't be a problem though. All right. So before we turn this on and see what we've got, let's go ahead and take the SID chip off and test that. I don't like to turn these things on with the SID in place because if they're good, sometimes we can blow them out. So okay, so let's pop out the SID. I was pointing at the PLA earlier, so but this is what I want to get out of here. And I might as well, since they're socketed, might as well take a look at the PLA. That came out way too easy. And the big 2 here. And no corrosion on any of the sockets that I can see, so that's good. And, I mean, the board is relatively clean. Oh, there goes the screw. And nothing's been unsoldered or anything. The bottom shield is still on. There's no corrosion anywhere, so that's looking good too. Awesome. Okay. So Vic 2 is good. Nope. That's too bad. But no surprise that the SID is bad. Okay. Let's do the PLA next. All right, the PLA is good. Let's see what the monitor is going to show us here. Ready? Out of memory error. There's a RAM error right there. But we get a blue screen that's got text on it. So let's go ahead and do the dead test in here. I'm putting a dead test cartridge in right now. Let's see how many flashes we get. Okay, we get 2 flashes. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. 2 flashes is usually this guy here. I forgot on the boards. It's either usually this guy here or this guy here. But let's see what we can come up with our tester here. Maybe even piggyback a memory chip on here and see. Okay, let's get our tester in here. Okay, and then we're going to want inline testing, in circuit testing, I should say. Oops. Okay, and let's put in our socket here. Let's see if my first hunch was correct on this first chip here. Failed. Okay, so that's that first one. Try the second one here. Passed. Okay, so that one's good. That one's good. That one's good. Yeah, U9 is the other one that's usually with two flashes, if I'm not mistaken. That passed, okay. That passed. That one passed. Okay. So my first hunch was correct. It's U24, so that's the one we're going to unsolder. And yeah. Okay, so obviously we need to take off the shield on the bottom. Let's change the tip on our soldering iron here. I'm going to use this tip instead of that fine tip. Get more coverage. Okay, and then let's get some flux on here to help us with this. All right, now we got the bottom shield off. We can attack U24 here, which is this guy right here. Okay, turned on the soldering pump, so while that's coming to temperature, also replace the tip on here and put the fine tip back on, so that way we can get ready to solder our socket. For now, no problem there. Holes go all the way through. No lifted traces, so we're good. So let's get a socket in there. All right, so I got a socket in there now. Make sure that there's no messed up traces or anything like that from our work. Let's plug this bad boy in here. And let's get a RAM chip in there. Okay, so we got the socket put in and we got a new RAM chip put in there. Let's Let's see what happens now. Keep our fingers crossed. Alright. See if that worked for us. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Nice. So we need a new SID for it, but outside of that, and why don't we go ahead and put a new SID in there, and we're going to put a new ARM SID. New ARM SID in this thing. So now let's boot this thing up again. Alrighty. So we got the board repaired, so that's a good thing. So now all we got to do is deal with the keyboard, and that should be easy. The boards are always the hard part, right? Soldering and unsoldering. So let's go ahead and get this off the table and then see what we're going to do about that keyboard. Okay, so what are we going to do about the case? So I have spare cases. I could take the easy way out and just use that, but I want to show you what we're going to do here to fix this stuff. So first things first, let's get the keyboard out of here. Okay. That'll make it easier for us. Now, all of this needs cleaning, deep cleaning, I can already tell. So I guess the next thing for us is to start pulling some of these keys. All right. I should get a little bin for these things. This is. You want to keep this spring for the space bar separated because it's a little bit longer. I think I've done this in a couple of other videos. First of all, make sure that when you put this back, the bigger side of this is the front, and that's where this metal piece points towards. So keep that in mind. And then like I said, this spring for the space bar, as you can see, is just a little bit longer than the rest of the springs for the keys. So you want to keep that separated. Now, in order to take this apart and get to replacing these things, you're going to have to unsolder these two wires for this to pop out. So if you want to be thorough, which you really should, I'm just cutting corners here to make this video shorter. But if you want to be thorough, you want to unsolder these two in order to take this whole thing off. Okay, I'm going to assess the damage here and see how ugly this is. And actually, you can't really see it because of the angle that the light in the camera is in, but it's looking pretty clean in there. I'm looking at the circuit board from underneath, and it's also looking pretty clean as well. So I don't think we need to really take this whole thing apart. We'll just go ahead and just replace those 3 stems that are in there. Okay, so I got 3 stems here. Okay, that's one bad stem there. Where's the other one here? That's the second one, and then the third is right here. All right, let's put this back together and then we can clean this up. So when you're putting these screws back in, I think I've mentioned this on several of my videos with other things that I do, you want to start them counterclockwise until you hear a click. That way you know they've landed on the thread that's already there. You don't want to risk forcing it, because then you can cross thread it. Okay, so now we've got the keyboard back together again. Let's go clean this up. I don't see any other. Before we go clean that up though, we actually still do though have a little issue here with these 3 keys. We gotta drill these stems out if we can. Or if we need to, we might just be able to pull them out because they look like they're not all the way in. So that'll be a good thing. So I just basically grab what I can and pull on it. There we go. That's one. This is all trash. Got to clean this grime up. 2. That's 3. So that took care of the caps, keycaps. All right. So let's clean this up. I'll get the keyboard cleaned up, and I'm going to throw all of these keys in the hydrosonic cleaner. Ultrasonic hydrosonic. I throw these in the ultrasonic cleaner. So when we come back, we should have a nice clean set of keys. It's a nice clean keyboard. So stay tuned. Okay, so now let's look at the case. But before I do so, I just want to do one little thing on this on the motherboard that I didn't do, and that was to clean up the flux. I completely forgot about that, and I don't want to forget. All right, so now we can get started on the case. You don't want to forget about cleaning the flux, because that stuff just doesn't go away, and it starts eating itself up and all that stuff. All right, so I cleaned this up, and I think we're ready to start rolling here. So I'm going to use this. And don't try to do all of them at once. I mean, you could, you don't have to, because what'll happen is you might not get to all of them at once. The epoxy will dry up, and then you've just wasted a whole bunch of epoxy. Okay, so we can let that dry. That'll take a few hours, but I usually like to leave it overnight. So that should take care of that. The only other thing that we had going on here is the little tabs in the back here, and that was these guys. So we have one tab that we have a piece of here, and I think it's strong enough to where we're going to be able to super glue it back on. All right, so that is pretty firm. Okay, so we'll just leave those two, not worry about the third one there, because I think 2 of them is good enough. So what I'm using here basically for strength is I'm using Bob Smith Industries MaxiCure, and then I'm following that up with an activator, this InstaSet, and this makes it cures right away. So you gotta make sure you got it where you want it, because as soon as you put that activator on this InstaSet, that thing's not going anywhere. So I don't use a spray bottle. I put it in this little vial, It's just easier to set where it's going instead of spraying it all over the place. All right, so I think we got that. So now we're just waiting for the cleaner to finish the keys, and then we'll bring everything together, back together again. So stay tuned. I brought this back real quick because there's one thing that I forgot to clue you guys in on. So where the posts, the standoffs here are intact, as soon as I put a little bit bigger screw or it gets tightened a little bit too much, that will crack along, like just like all the others did. So there's this 3D printed piece here that basically I'm going to epoxy over it, and that will give it strength and keep it from cracking. So this is one more thing that we're going to do here. So this way I don't have to cut that off and put one of these. I just stick that little O-ring, if you will, in there and let that set. So just wanted to take a time out and have you see that. So we got the standoffs here, and then we got this little O-ring with the original standoff there. If any of these were intact, I would put these little O-rings around them as well. So all right, so stay tuned, we'll be back. Okay, so we let this dry overnight, all the epoxy. So now we've got all of these standoffs in place, and yeah, so let's go ahead and while that was drying overnight, we put the keys in the ultrasonic cleaner. So these are clean and ready to go. Get this mess cleaned up there. So let's start getting these put back in place. I also cleaned up the keyboard itself, so should be ready to go. First thing I'm going to do is put the space bar back in. Again, the long side goes to the front, and the metal hinge thing here goes to the front as well. And we put the spring aside just for the space bar. So okay, let me get that out of the way now. Okay, so now we can start putting the keys in. Okay, we're missing the 3 springs for the keys that were broken. Okay. Now we're ready. The function keys have two little places for the stem to go into, so you want to do the one on the far right. Okay, so I'm going to start with the top row. So start with the left arrow. And then the numbers. Okay, now I got a nice clean keyboard. So let's go ahead and get that mounted up here. I also cleaned the case, so the case looks pretty nice. Remember, clockwise a little bit until you hear a little click, so you know it's on the same thread as it came out of. Otherwise you risk not just cross-threading it, but you know how brittle these keyboards are. You also run the risk of cracking the keyboard standoff. Okay, that's looking pretty nice. Okay, so let's get to mounting this motherboard on here. I want to give you a little bit of advice, especially if you're printing these standoffs from Thingiverse or something like that. Keep in mind that we took off the bottom cardboard and shielding on the bottom. Well, that bottom cardboard and shielding made up a little bit more thickness underneath the chassis. So now that we're not using those, we need to take into account that these standoffs are the same thickness as the riser that it was replacing, but it didn't take into account that we've taken out the cardboard and the shielding on the bottom. And how does that matter? Why? Well, let me show you. This is a screw in front of the standoff, and you can see the screw is just a little bit taller than the standoff. And so the reason for that is because that shield in that cardboard would have taken up a little bit more thickness. So what will happen is if you put the screw in with these standoffs, it's going to push underneath it, and one of two things will happen. It'll either snap the standoff off that you've just glued, or the screw won't screw in any further because it's going to hit the bottom of the case and the board is going to be loose. So I had already printed these standoffs when I realized that, so I'm using these little rubber washers to make up for that extra space. The future standoffs that I'm going to be printing are going to be a little bit thicker to account for that. The other thing is that even if they were to fit, you know, on the normal height of these, the problem without the shield and the cardboard is that this would sit just a little bit lower, and it would make the cartridge a little bit harder to get in because the space between the case and the bottom of the motherboard, the circuit board here, would be a lot smaller. So it also makes it a little bit more difficult for the cartridge to slide in. So anyways, I had already printed these standoffs, and my future ones that I'm going to be printing will be a little bit thicker, probably a millimeter and a half, maybe thicker, to make up for the shield and the cardboard thickness that would have normally been underneath the circuit board. So for now though, we're going to put these. The other reason I have these rubber things is because, like this, for example, the standoffs that I'm not replacing, again, because we took that shield off, what'll happen is if I over tighten this, because the screw isn't holding the circuit board down all the way, it'll crack. It'll crack the standoff that's already there, the stock standoff. So that's the deal you have to be careful with when you take off the cardboard and the shield underneath. Okay. All right. Just lining this up now. Let's get these screws in there. All right, when you're screwing these in, be careful. You don't want to over tighten. Circuit board's in here nice and firm, so these screws are loose. Now we're good to get the top of this case on here. Actually, okay, notice I'm not putting heat sinks on these things. I don't use this thing. I'm not going to be using this very much. So heat sinks might be a good idea to put on top of the Big 2 and the PLA. Not worried about the arm SID, that stays pretty cool. But that's something that you might want to consider. Oh, there we go. All right. Okay. So these are the function keys. All right. So everything seems to work. We replaced a few chips, cleaned the board up, and yeah. I think this was one more that's ready for the pile of Commodores. If you're curious about what that looks like, I tend to repair a lot of these things. Some for people that are friends. Don't really do it, as a job or anything like that. It's just a lot of fun for me. But I tend to repair them, but I don't tend to sell them. I should, but there's a lot of Commodores in here. Commodores and Ataris. And this is just one room. I mean, there's, you know, XTs, PCs, and then there's another room that's full of SX64s. So, anyways, thought you might enjoy seeing a little bit of what this room is about. All right, so I think that'll wrap it up for this one. And yeah, hope you learned something out of this. And like I always say, you only live once, so enjoy every day like it's your last. Peace out.